Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have the Realme 12 Pro Plus and we're going to give it a full review. Let's get started. I can easily tell you that this will be one of the most complete devices today and highly recommended to purchase. But anyway, let me describe in this video everything about it so you know if it is what you are looking for or prefer some other proposal. Its launch price in Mexico has been 9,699 Mexican pesos. That is approximately $575, although remember that the prices here are not the same as there. Generally in Mexico the prices are a little higher, but I think this is a very well balanced device. This for the 256GB storage version, but there is also a 512GB edition at a price of 10,999 pesos, which is approximately $650. This adjusted price allows it to compete very well against most of its rivals, although this price is also mainly due to the fact that its distribution will be exclusively online through Amazon and Mercado Libre. Obviously this will vary around the world, but in Mexico this is the strategy. So there we could consider a small weak point, especially for people who are not used to buying online. They might be a little bit afraid of it. But what do you think if you join me to know point by point everything that this device can offer us? We start by taking a look at the front, where it has a very premium look with a curved screen that definitely looks attractive. It has very thin bezels and an excellent use of the front with this screen with enough size. And even though we won't find Gorilla Glass as a special protection on this glass, it's actually a 0.55mm double reinforced glass that we've already tested on other Realme devices by dropping it on the ground without it suffering any kind of fall. So we're really looking at a very tough and very resistant glass. So even though it has a curved screen, you shouldn't get the feeling that it's a fragile device. It will actually have good resistance. On the right side, we are going to find the power button along with the volume buttons in a fairly thin plastic frame. At the top is placed a microphone and the secondary audio output. The left side is completely clean and serves to appreciate that it has a thickness of 8.75mm, although you should know that the camera module protrudes in an important way. At the bottom, we find the slot for the nano SIM cards. In this case, the dual SIM version is available, although this may vary depending on the different countries and regions. Then we will find a microphone, the USB-C port, and finally the main speaker. The device has a weight of 196 grams, and believe me, it is too cute. Holding it in the hand is also very comfortable. While we could not categorize it as an ultralight device, believe me, it does give you very good comfort, especially because of the soft touch that this faux leather edition has. Especially for the finish that has synthetic leather. In this case, I have in my hands the edition in blue color, but it is also in beige color. And in both cases, it is an extremely beautiful device, not only to the eye, but also to the touch. In the central part, it has a line that also gives it a distinctive touch. I do not know if it is possible to distinguish through the camera the texture that this line has on the inside, although to the touch, it is completely smooth. Realme claims that the design of this device has been inspired by luxury watches. And believe me, it does come to have this elegant touch, especially in the contour of the camera module. Notice how it has a very nice texture. There is no doubt that we are in front of one of the most beautiful devices on the market, and finding it in this price range is very nice. So this could also be one of its strongest points. Although it does not offer as much level of resistance because it does not have certification against water and dust to a level of being able to be submerged. We will only find IP65 certification, so it has good resistance against dust, but not so much against water. However, I think it can withstand being used in the rain or suffering a water spill, but you have to be more careful so that it does not fall into the water. The screen is 6.7 inches, a very common size in the range, but it offers us a full HD plus resolution with a slightly wider proportion than normal, although very light, possibly due to the curvature of the screen. So the specific resolution remains at 1080 by 2412 pixels. The density it achieves is 394 pixels per inch, so I really think it's a good quality display. Its technology is OLED, so it's going to offer us intense colors, very high contrasts, and good viewing angles, as we're almost used to in all the devices in the range. So it is a very good screen. but I think it does not get to stand out over its rivals, as most rivals will offer the same screen quality. In this case, its maximum peak brightness is 950 nits, so it's not something very spectacular, but enough for comfortable outdoor use, and the minimum brightness we're also going to see is very comfortable. It goes down to a very important way to use it comfortably in the evenings. In fact, something curious is that it includes a setting for the minimum brightness allowed in case you want to go even lower, or in case you want the minimum brightness not to go down to levels that it is very difficult to see the brightness selector again. It has 3 screen calibration modes, and note that within the Pro category there are still 2 different categories, so I think it's great for adjusting the colors exactly how you want to see them. Obviously, it will also have the eye care mechanisms, and we can enable a grayscale mode, and in case you didn't know, it has 120 Hz in its refresh rate, just as we would expect from a device of this price point, so it gives us an excellent viewing experience. In this case, you can set it as standard at 60 Hz, or you can set it to always be at 120. But it is advisable to enable the automatic selection to make the adjustment automatically, and we can achieve a balanced power consumption. This device will have stereo sound, which is very good news. Although most of its competitors also offer 2 speakers, so it is a good thing, but it does not stand out from the rest. The sound has good power, although it seems to me that the mid-frequencies stand out a little more, so I did not love it completely, but I think it is a good sound for the price you are paying. What do you think if you join me to listen to a test? Although remember that it's not the same to listen to it live. As you noticed, the bottom speaker is the main one and the one with the best quality and presence of bass frequencies, while on the top the sound is shared between the earphone for calls and a secondary output. So I think that overall the sound is good. Regarding the software that accompanies the sound, note that it has Dolby Atmos for you to choose some surround sound preset, and in this case has a 10-band equalizer, but it will only be activated when you use headphones. As you already noticed, you need a USB-C adapter or headphones that have this connector to be able to use this accessory, and within the music preset, this 10-band equalizer will appear. So I think that here it could also improve, because it would be much better to let us equalize the sound of the speakers and not only of the headphones. This is a point that I could consider as weak, and if you do not want to use wired headphones, we have good news because it does have good support for wireless headphones. In addition to the SBC and AAC codecs that virtually all smartphones include, this one also brings the aptX adaptive codec that can give you much higher resolution in compatible headphones, and also supports the LHDC codec that we usually only see in high-end devices and in a few devices. This is actually a very strong point because, for example, the Galaxy S24 does not support this codec, so it is able to give you very high-resolution audio wirelessly. Obviously with compatible headphones, but that's excellent news. Next, we're going to listen to a test of the 2 microphones it incorporates.
Este es un audio grabado con el Realme 12 Pro Plus y sus micrófonos integrados en una grabación estándar.
The microphones honestly don't seem to me to provide a very high quality audio recording, but we are going to listen to a test audio recorded at very high volume on my sound system to try to see if this microphone generates any distortion when recording in this type of extremely noisy conditions. Like most devices, this phone has a very good audio recording even in these conditions, so you could perfectly well record at concerts or something like that and the audio will not get distorted. The front camera is 32 megapixels with f-aperture 2.2 and fixed focus. And in this case, in addition to the traditional shortcut from the lock screen to open the camera, the device offers us a quick launch option that works as follows. When you have the screen locked, you can press any of the volume buttons to quickly enter the camera. Although it accesses the city mode specifically, which is a bit odd, although the difference between city mode and photo mode is very basic. But in urban mode, you don't have access to the front-facing camera. So just so you're aware of this. In fact, we could also draw an O on the screen, although that option comes disabled and you have to enable it from the settings for the front camera. We will find a capture speed that is good, although if you take multiple photos continuously, you are not going to see such a snappy capture. In fact, neither has a burst enabled on the front camera, and in the settings, if you can enable the gesture with the palm or tap anywhere on the screen to capture a photo to facilitate those moments where the shutter is too far away. In the bottom right corner, we are going to see two buttons. The first one is to select some color filter, and as you realize, if you can view each of them in real time simultaneously. And the second button is to access the beauty mode, which can become quite complex as it offers us multiple parameters to modify the face, such as skin texture, cheeks, eye and nose size, as well as chin size and even head size, plus add some retouching and makeup. Although even with all the settings maxed out, I don't find the result looks too artificial or fake. This front camera definitely offers a very high level of detail. The picture is 32 megapixels. So we do have good detail, but it has the particularity that having fixed focus means you need to be close to the camera if you really want to retain a good level of detail. Notice how when you are far away from the camera, the picture comes out much more out of focus, so group shots I don't think would come out as attractive. In fact, not even at a medium distance, so I think that point could be improved. Selfies are going to be very personal if you want them to come out detailed. Indoors, selfies still maintain a sufficient level of detail, but there's a lot more graininess in the photo, although they still retain good color saturation. And in backlit conditions, you notice that the preview is not optimized, but then it manages to balance highlights and shadows nicely. So these types of photos I think definitely come out with good quality. Meanwhile, at night I think it does manage to maintain a good quality. In fact, in this case I liked it better than the interior photography. It seems that if you have an artificial light source nearby, they do manage to recover it while maintaining good detail and good colors. Although I find it curious that they do not merge the pixels, being a high-resolution sensor with which from my point of view they could achieve a more spectacular photograph in terms of light capture. But in this case, they decide to keep the 32 megapixel photography. And notice how in much more complex night backlight scenarios, which would be super complicated, the device more or less manages to do a good job in auto mode. But using the night mode along with the screen simulating flash, the truth is that the result is absolutely fine. Here is an example photo of a night portrait, where we also have a good result, although obviously with much more noise present. But in the daytime we realize that it is not able to keep the foreground objects in focus, only the people. Therefore, the picture might not come out as natural as we would like. Plus the colors in portrait mode honestly don't come out very accurate to say the least. So, I don't think it will stand out much in selfie. On the back we will find a tremendous photographic system. For starters, we have the 16mm ultra-wide camera, so it's not exaggeratedly wide, but it's fine. It's 8 megapixels with f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. Then we'll find the 24mm camera, considered the main camera, with 50 megapixels, f1.8 aperture, autofocus and optical stabilization. And since it is a high-resolution sensor, Realme offers a crop inside it to have a kind of virtual lens of 48mm, that is zoom 2x lossless, retaining a 12.5 megapixel photograph with the same main lens specifications. And the third camera is a periscope lens that gives us 71mm, i.e. zoom 3x's. But in this case, what I love is that it combines a periscope lens with a high-resolution sensor, so it has 64 megapixels. The lens has f-aperture 2.6, autofocus and optical stabilization. But by combining those features, what we're able to do is we're able to crop the sensor as well, so it's also able to give us sort of a virtual 140mm lens, so a lossless zoom 6 Equus with 16 megapixel photos and the same prime lens specs. Definitely, it is a very advanced photographic system worthy of a high-end, and find it in a device of this price, the truth is that it is surprising. This is easily its strongest point. Just remember that this third circle at the bottom right is not a camera. Next, we are going to do a test trying to capture the number 3 to be sure of what is the speed of capture that can get this device. Obviously, I'm going to do 2 tests to be sure I've done a correct test. Then let's visualize the results. Observe, the capture speed is very good. I practically captured the precise instant, and on my first attempt I was even a little bit ahead. So I can tell you that the shutter responds with very good speed, and in fact notice that it also has a burst, in this case up to 20 pictures. Although the burst takes almost a second to start, so you have to press the shutter well in advance, but it does allow you to capture multiple photos at this instant. Only because it takes almost a second to activate, you might miss the exact moment. In the lower right corner again, we will see an access to the different color filters that we can use in addition to the facial beauty mode, but in this case only with one parameter, unlike the front camera. We will find in this part the zoom presets we have. Each of them has optical quality, in some cases like 2 and 6x's with the sensor cropped, but definitely gives us an excellent experience. But if you don't like to visualize the zoom in terms of cellular, you can switch to urban mode to visualize the zoom in terms of professional photography with the 16, 24, 48, 71 and 140mm lenses. And interestingly, within the urban mode we find a kind of automatic zoom, although honestly I don't think these tools are too useful. There is also another option that is going to allow you to have manual focus, but I feel it's quite strange to have these kind of controls here, considering that it also has a professional photography mode, where you have access to many more parameters like an ISO that can go up to 6400 or the shutter speed that can go up to 30 seconds, plus compensation, focus, white balance, and of course notice that in this case you can take pictures in RAW for more advanced post-development. So photographers, I think, are going to really enjoy the experience with this camera. Even in the menu, you can add histogram and focus for even more accurate photography. If you want to scan a document, it doesn't have an immediate detection from the main camera, but it does suggest you enter the special document scanner mode, in which it does have the automatic detection to do the cropping of these sheets, and it also allows you to also enhance the style of the scan so that you have a photo that looks like it was scanned with a specific device. So honestly, I really like the options that the scanner has, and from the share menu you could also send it to print, either on a printer that has Wi-Fi, or you can also directly save it as a PDF document. And something I love that I had not previously seen available in Realme is that QR codes are now scanned directly from the main camera, unlike past generations where you had to enter Google Lens. So the performance is very good. By having 2 high-resolution sensors, we have the possibility of having very good definition photos in various settings. The 50 megapixel is in the setting with the main camera, although I must be honest and does not seem to have taken advantage of all the information from that sensor. But either way, if you could achieve good pictures and do some cropping on them while maintaining a good enough level of detail. The periscope camera, remember that it integrates 64 megapixels, so you can take advantage of that high resolution as well. And in this case, I feel like it seems to be better utilized, as you can get to notice as we get closer to these objects, it feels like it still maintains a very good level of detail. In the motion scenes, we have excellent performance at virtually all focal length settings. As you can see, the person remains perfectly static, no blurred movements or anything like that. And also at the 2x zoom setting that does a crop on the sensor. In fact, also in the 3x setting we have a good quality, but in the 6x setting, applying a crop on the sensor is where it can get to suffer in scenes with a lot of movement. Photos with the main camera I think come out well in terms of level of detail, color rendering, contrast and more. Just if you get too strict about the quality of the lens, you will notice some small distortions and chromatic aberration from the main camera, which could be uncomfortable for some people. Although I insist this is quite demanding, and curiously I only notice it in the upper right corner, but it is slight. The ultra-wide camera has a bit more distortion due to the very nature of the lens, but I honestly think it also maintains good quality, and I like that it maintains good color consistency between the main camera and the ultra-wide camera. Although the ultra-wide camera perhaps captures the colors slightly paler but very similar. And in this case, I don't think it's something to do with the lens, because remember, we are talking about a crop inside the sensor, so this is not the edge of the physical lens, but maybe this kind of small details can be corrected with an update. The truth of the matter is that 2x photography looks good if you don't look at all these details. In 3x again, we have the photograph with the periscope camera. And notice how it manages again to gain back a lot of light and a lot of detail. I really like the photograph at this zoom setting, and again it maintains good color rendering with this periscope lens as well. Notice that photography with 6x with this kind of virtual lens cropping the sensor is also going to offer us a very good quality, especially in this type of scenes with very good lighting. And with respect to the zoom, notice how we are going to zoom in little by little, and this device at each setting maintains a considerably high quality in the zoom that we usually only see in the most expensive flagship devices. In this case, it can go up to 120x of digital zoom, which definitely seems to be a bit forced, although notice that at maximum zoom it doesn't optimize the letters as much as it does at 100x. So 120x won't be as recommendable, but I definitely think the zoom quality is the highlight of this device and easily one of its strongest points. I think in this price range there is not going to be any other device that will offer you this level of zoom. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera performs well in noise control, although it does not offer as much detail. On the other hand, the main camera, I think it improves a lot in the level of detail and retains a good treatment in the noise in addition to having a good saturation in the colors. On the other hand, in the 2x setting, we still have good quality, but again, we see some areas a little more out of focus. So the best thing to do is to take the picture with 3x and look at the excellent photo quality we get. I really love that with the periscope lens. Even in these conditions where there's not as much light, we still have very good picture quality. And if you use the 6x setting, we still get a good picture. So I like that these cameras perform well even when there's not as much light. In backlit conditions, it doesn't have a preview that already looks optimized, but after taking the picture, it does a very good processing, and in this case, the main camera manages to get a very good result in light and shadow balance. In the case of the ultra-wide camera, it is also going to have a good balance, but the shadow area is perhaps going to come out a little darker than I would like, and of course, it reveals a much higher level of chromatic aberration in the areas of the edges. But this is more or less normal for a device in this price range. On the other hand, at the 2x zoom setting, we still have a good balance of highlights and shadows, but curiously at the 3x setting, the colors start to distort a bit more. So backlit, it looks like the periscope camera could specifically improve on the color processing because in all other things, it is an extremely pleasing photograph. And finally, in the 6x setting will be where the device begins to show its weakness in this type of backlight scenes, maintaining several burned areas and other overexposed areas, so in this section could improve. At night, we have a good result with both the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. In both cases, we see a bit of grain, but I like that they balance well the light area, something that not all devices are able to do. I have even seen more expensive devices that do not achieve this good balanced result. On the other hand, with the 2x setting, we still have a good result, and with the 3x lens, we will appreciate that it gives a little more priority to illuminate well the area of greater light, but the darker areas may have a little more suffering. And interestingly, with the 6x setting, the focus starts to struggle a lot in these types of conditions. But note that using the night mode, you can improve practically all your results. Although in the main and ultra-wide it looks very similar, but where you will notice the difference will be from the 3x lens, where the darker areas can gain a little more light without there being an exaggerated difference. But with the 6x setting, you can finally get a focused photograph in these conditions. But without any light source present in the picture, notice that the ultra-wide camera still manages to gather good light information and handles noise well. Although there are some areas that are a bit reddish, but it really is a good picture. The main camera also performs well with the 2x setting. We start to see a different color treatment, and if we try to zoom in further, you will notice that it will always digitally zoom in and no longer use the periscope lens, especially in scenes this dark. So even though you can zoom in really close, it's not really using its periscope camera anymore because of the level of darkness that is reached, which is very normal in the smartphone market. The main camera can also adjust its focus for close objects, in this case for macro photography with a good result. Although the optimum in other smartphones is to enable autofocus on the ultra-wide camera. But since this device does not have those features, the ideal will be to use the 2x zoom, and definitely if you can achieve some detailed pictures with these macro capabilities. And look at the panoramic photography capability. It is definitely a very good result because it keeps a good level of detail in the whole panorama. Just tell the people who are close to you not to move because they might come out a little bit deformed. Portrait photography is another point that this device does with good quality, keeping the foreground in focus and blurring the background with good precision. Also maintains a good level of detail, although the portrait with the 3x lens seems to me that it should be much more attractive, since in this case I consider that it does not have so much level of detail, plus its behavior in these backlit scenes is not quite accurate, but I think they could correct it with some updates. For video recording, the main camera and the periscope camera, if they are capable of recording video in 4K, and that comes in handy. However, the ultra-wide camera is only going to be able to record in full HD at 30 frames per second, since even if you want to record in full HD at 60 frames per second, it will also be available only for the main camera and the periscope camera. This could be a weak point, although in the price range it is a common thing to see that the ultra-wide camera does not have that many capabilities in video recording. So the recommended setting for recording on this device is full HD at 30 frames per second, still on the bottom right. We will find again the filters we had seen for photography, which are also available for video recording, keeping the full HD quality. If you try to record in 4K, these filters will not be available, so it is important to notice this difference. And we can also access a face retouch mode, again available only in full HD. And in fact, in the lower left corner, we also have a depth mode. AI allows us to record with a portrait effect, blurring the background in a moment. I show you the result at the time of starting the video recording. We will be able to have a slider for zoom, but we no longer have the quick shortcuts to switch between one and another lens. And that seems to me that it is something negative, as I would like more quickly switch between one and another lens here. The zoom can become a little slower. Also offers us a button to turn on the flashlight while we are recording without any problem. And we can also take pictures while we are recording, in addition to pause and resume our recording, but we cannot rotate to the front camera without stopping the video recording, as if we can do in some of them. We can also take pictures while recording, as well as pause and resume our recording, but we cannot rotate to the front camera without stopping the video recording, as if we can do in some other devices. As always, you can touch on screen to adjust the focus and exposure. Even you can lock that setting, but in this case also has a movie mode that would be a professional recording mode, although in this mode will also make a recording in a wider format. But in any case, if it offers us the manual parameters to adjust the video recording as if it were a professional mode. The videos recorded in 4K with the main camera look of good quality, although with the color rendering a bit artificial. I feel that the colors don't look as natural as I would like, but definitely it does maintain good level of detail. And note that recording in this resolution, it is not able to switch to the periscope camera if you already started your video recording, but if you stop it and start it again, you could record with the periscope camera in 4K as well. But if you stop it and start it again, you could record with the periscope camera as well. Periscope camera in 4K as well, although in this case I feel the colors are still less accurate compared to the main camera video. The ultra-wide camera only records in full HD, and honestly it would be the worst quality video of all three lenses, so it will not be as recommended to record with this lens. In fact, it feels with little level of detail, although when you are recording in full HD, it will allow you to switch between the ultra-wide camera, the main camera, and the periscope camera. So this will be the recommended setting, but it is definitely a lower level of detail than what you would be able to record with the periscope camera. Less detail than you could achieve if you record at the 4K setting, so it will be up to you as a user what you prefer. But the good news is that if it does allow you to switch between the three lenses at this resolution, the maximum zoom when recording video is going to be 18x, and I think it does retain a good quality. Just remember that if you want to switch between the three lenses, it should be in full HD, and notice how the device can maintain a constant focus when recording, which I really like. So even though the person we are recording is at a different angle, it will still be in full HD. Person we are recording is at different distances. I think the device has a very good and very precise adjustment of the focus so that it is not lost at any time. At least that in this perfect lighting situation indoors, you will notice that the ultra-wide camera will suffer a lot. If already outdoors we saw that suffered with respect to color management, indoors what will be most noticeable will be the noise management, because in some scenarios you see an exaggerated noise, and look at the abysmal difference that exists when switching to the main camera. Gaining much more contrast and main camera gaining much more contrast, and of course better detail and switching to the telephoto camera. We will also retain a good performance in this type of scenes with intermediate light, and just remind you that if you want more detail you can record in 4K, and notice that the level of detail is much nicer. So even recording indoors in these conditions, we have something positive, although noise can be revealed with greater intensity recording in this resolution in backlight. the main camera will have a considerably good performance in this case. I think it comes to balance the noise in this case. I think it manages to balance the highlights and shadows in a good way, although there are still some small overexposed areas, but honestly for its price range we cannot get so demanding. The advantage is that it does not seem to have aggressive lighting jumps. So I liked it. Of course, the ultra-wide camera will not have such a positive performance in this case, especially for the recording quality that we had already seen from this camera. That does not become very remarkable, but in this case we also feel some jumps a little stronger in the exposure. And at night again, we will find a very similar result to what we have already seen. That is to say, the ultra-wide camera does not have a very remarkable quality. There will be more noise and will not have as much light entry. Although within what is possible, I think the result becomes acceptable. However, in the darkest areas we'll not be able to get much information, leaving very little saturation. Although it is curious that suddenly gains color, so the behavior is quite strange but sincerely bad. It will be advisable to record with the main camera. That obviously will give us more light, but also in this case I feel that there is a more aggressive jump in the exposure that can become that your videos do not look so nice. This definitely could be corrected with an update, giving it a better treatment in this type of lighting conditions. But notice how in the darkest areas the main camera, if you get to recover a huge amount of light compared against the camera ultra-wide. And in the case of the periscope camera, notice that it struggles a lot with the focus in this kind of night scenes, so it will not be so recommended to use it in this kind of conditions, as it also has less light input, so it will not be able to focus and have good color saturation in the darkest scenes. If you record video in, the stabilization is going to be very simple, since you depend only on the optical stabilization that may be insufficient. In fact, neither when you are walking nor much less when you are running you will have a good shot in this sense. So I think this may be one of its weaknesses, and obviously with the periscope camera will be much more difficult to have a more stable shot with the ultra-wide camera. Obviously the movements can be disguised a little more, but you know that I have not really liked the quality we have in this camera. But if you are no longer recording in 4, almost not in full HD, I think that the movements can be disguised much better when walking, but not so much when running. See how with the periscope camera we will still get a good level of stabilization when walking, as long as you record in full HD. Obviously when running it is not recommended, and when running it is not recommended. Running is not recommended. And in this case it does have a super stable mode, but it will adjust the resolution in full HD to 60 frames per second. And despite that, I think it still does not give us a 100% stable experience as we would like, although it does improve drastically when you are running. Curiously, this device also supports video recording and portrait effect, this in full HD at 30 frames per second. If there is not much movement, can be an acceptable result, although if you get to notice a little artificial in some edges, what I like is that although it stops detecting the face, still keeps the focus on the body. And in this case, when I move away from the scene, we will not notice that the intensity of the blur changes. So it is not a result as natural as we see in other devices. Fortunately seems to maintain a good stabilization, but is not able to keep in focus the objects in the foreground but only the bodies. So the result is obviously not going to be very natural. The fast camera of this device, fortunately it can be in 4K, although its slowest setting is X, which could be a little faster than we would like. And note that it has no stabilization, so it is not as spectacular as we have seen in some other devices, but the maximum is 960X, with what you can perfectly get to record movements in nature for much more spectacular shots. So I think the fast camera meets good quality. And with respect to the slow motion, it can be in full HD at 120 frames per second, which for this price range I think is something that is positive for this type of creative scenes, but we can go even slower up to 240 frames per second, although the video resolution is decreased to HD. So I think it is within what we would expect in a device of this price. In this sense, does not disappoint, although not too surprising either. The front camera will record in full HD, so in this case is a clear disadvantage, as there are other devices in this same price range and can record in 4K with the front camera. Also consider that it has no stabilization, so it is not so recommended for content creators. Note that neither has autofocus, and it costs a little expose correctly, especially in backlight scenes. We will suddenly notice some aggressive jumps in exposure if you are moving a lot in such scenarios. Therefore, recording with this camera seems very simple, and in this case it can be disappointed. Indoors, it confirms that it is a camera that is simple. In this case, note that it is not able to handle noise so well, although curiously handles better exposure when you do not have so much light around you compared to what we saw in the previous clip, but still not a remarkable camera. Note how at night, when you are facing a light source, if we are going to have a good result, but if you go to darker areas immediately, you start to notice that the exposure is not as good as it was in the previous clip. Dark areas. You immediately start to notice a little more noise. However, I think the result is within what we can accept in this price range. If we turn off the lights and we go to an area with much more darkness, obviously the noise level intensifies a little, but note that has automatic flash through the screen so you can get to illuminate you better to recover a little lighting. This is positive because there are few devices that allow you to use the camera in a dark area. Few devices that allow you to use the screen to illuminate you in the night video recording, so this feature comes in handy in the front camera. Also find the fast camera function with the same settings that we saw a moment ago, but in full HD, however, does not offer slow motion, but if you will offer a portrait recording mode, but still looks very similar to what we saw a moment ago, i.e. at times the artificial edges are noticed. And as it has no stabilization, also feels a video of not much quality, so honestly I did not really like the recording with this front camera, although there are few devices that have this feature to record with a portrait effect on the front camera, so if you're going to be static and with good lighting conditions, maybe you can get to take advantage, but in motion not. Finally, note how the device has the dual recording mode, so you can record on the front camera and the rear camera at the same time. This does it in full HD at 28 frames per second, and notice that it keeps the focus enabled and also the ability to zoom, although obviously it doesn't change between the three lenses, but the experience is definitely quite good. In fact, you also have the picture-in-picture mode that can be in a circle or in a rectangle. This floating image, you can move it along the screen with a small stop on the right, and with respect to zoom and focus has the same behavior that already told you. In the software, we will find Android 14 and Realme UI N5 running on this device, so this is excellent news as it comes updated from the factory, and in this case the manufacturer offers 2 years of software updates and 3 years of security patches, which is not the most widespread, but I like that at least if they offer a clear policy of how many updates you will receive. This device, as always, Realme will add some additional options on your device. For example, we will find something and they are display, which is something that usually all devices with AMOLED screens bring, and in this case will not be the exception. In fact, here you can configure even your Bitmoji to appear your character on these covers, or you can generate some traces based on pictures that you yourself have captured, and watch how it will practically draw my face to place it on the always on cover, so it offers you very advanced customization features. Watch how in this case it detected the edges very well, and you can even select the color that you want to have. So this can definitely be an attractive point for several people. In fact, you could also set your Ormoji, which is a kind of virtual character based on a picture of you. Although there are not many sections where you can take advantage of that feature, you will also find various themes that you can apply in a special store, so you also reach a high level of customization with this section. The device also includes a function to help you brighten up the edges of the screen, so you can also get a high level of personalization with this section. Help you to light up the edges of the screen when you receive some special notification in order to let you know even if the device is upside down thanks to the curved screen. This device also has a feature called Smart Suggestions, which is a kind of dynamic island at the top. Will appear a kind of floating notification that you can press to reveal more information. However, in this case, it is a feature that very few apps are going to take advantage of. In this case, only one app called Grab is using it. And honestly, I don't think many developers will end up taking advantage of this feature, so in a way, it is useless. Evidently, it will also feature the split view, feature that you can enable by swiping 3 fingers upwards, but it will not work. By swiping 3 fingers up, but not all apps are supported yet, it can still be useful for some people. The apps remain linked even in the recent apps view, and it also has the floating window option. In this case, also note that you can use the smart sidebar that is available, from which you can not only open apps, but you can also open a history of apps, and you can also open a history of apps. open applications, but you can also open a history of recent files, although ideally, for example, in WhatsApp you could drag and drop this image, but it is not supported, and in Telegram it is more or less supported, because look at how it will ask you in which chat you want to send that message, even though you are already inside a chat, but at least it has some level of functioning. But back to talking about the floating screen apps, note that you can only open one at a time, so you are a bit limited. There is no way to open multiple windows on this screen, and neither YouTube nor Instagram are available as floating screen. It also has an option called Quick Return, but again it is not used by the vast majority of applications, and also has Quick Launch that will use the fingerprint reader to hold your finger on it, and you can have several shortcuts available before releasing your finger like many devices. Also offers a good variety of gestures to control the device, some with the screen off, others also sliding on the screen on, for example, to take screenshots and similar things, and you could also get to turn on the flashlight if you press the volume button. In this case, with the screen off, you hold down the volume button down and this action is done. Then I think it can become useful too, and you could also enable the screen to turn on when you lift the device and similar things. Inside the gallery, you can also select several pictures and press the create button and see how you can create both a GIF and a collage. So it is a tool that is already included in the system in the photo editor. You also have some tools like the eraser, although obviously it will not be an eraser as advanced as the one in other devices, but notice how we can paint the pictures and we can also create a collage, and we can also create a GIF and a collage, so it is a tool that is already included in the system, other devices, but see how we can paint the area we want to erase or the object or the person, and then see how the device will do the processing, but often will not be entirely accurate, so I insist is not the best eraser of objects I've seen, but after several attempts you can finally get to blur that area well. And in the Realme Lab section with experimental functions, note that we have the option to measure the heart rate using the fingerprint reader that can serve as a curiosity. Another interesting option of the Realme Lab section is that you can connect a pair of Bluetooth headphones and a pair of wired headphones so that several people can enjoy audio with headphones. Finally, note that includes the Send Space, that is a Send Space, which is a very useful feature that can be used as a curiosity. It includes the Send Space, which is a kind of limiter where you can have some work or study modes to set limits, and you can set which applications you want to be allowed while you are in that mode. This in order not to be a slave of your cell phone, although something very similar is the implementation that all Android bring with digital wellness and parental controls. In general, the Realme system has reached a good maturity. Although in this case it also comes with a lot of bloatware and many pre-installed applications, including several games that I find unnecessary. Some stores and other installed platforms that I did not ask for, although fortunately if you can uninstall them, but obviously this can become a little annoying, but something that should also highlight the system is the optical technology that comes very well, even allows you to adjust the intensity. And for those who do not know, is that the vibration motor is on the x-axis and produces some small bumps or that feeling in your hand every time you do some action. For example, at the time of making this action of the slider, you can feel the vibration in your hand. A slider action you feel taps, so you can have a much more advanced experience in the system. Each slider will produce this feeling, and it definitely feels like an advanced operating system. Even the time to slide between these recent applications also feels a blow in each change, so the interaction is very advanced and the system is very easy to use. That the interaction is very advanced. And in fact, this is one of the systems that I feel has taken more advantage of the optical engine, not only in the clock or in this type of selectors, but also in other areas of the system. So it's a very mature operating system that can still improve in some things, but it seems to me that it's on the right track. The fingerprint reader that is inside the screen offers us the ability to have up to 5 records. As you realize, is a fairly fast reader that does not need too much time the finger on the sensor, but anyway, it will offer us a good performance. In fact, being a fingerprint reader inside the screen will also allow us to change the animation of this unlock or even leave it without animation, then it comes in handy. Of course, it also has facial unlocking. Although it is only in 2 dimensions, but if you want it for a slightly more comfortable experience when unlocking your phone, you could get to use it. But you know that usually what I offer you for the most comfortable experience is the extended unlock that is a little hidden in this case. But if you can get to enable this in order to register places or trusted devices, and that the device remains unlocked, and do not have to constantly be putting your fingerprint or your pattern Realme also offers a section called Payment Protection where you can place some applications that you want to have special security when making a payment. For example, will verify that it is not enabled data transfer by USB when you're using such applications. So I think it comes well to feel even safer. In fact, it is also able to block the towers that might try to intercept your signal to steal you. Intercept your signal to steal messages or similar things, and of course it also offers good advanced options like locking applications, so you have a second filter. Even if you lend your unlocked phone, you can also hide applications or save files in a private safe, or even clone the whole system to have two devices in one, each with their own applications and files and each with their own passwords. The password manager is the Google Password Manager, so it will automatically suggest you to fill in your passwords from the keyboard. And in this case, fortunately by default, it has the option to first check for your fingerprint before automatically filling in your information. And if you happen to lose your device, you will also have the Find My Google Device section, although in this case again it feels that it really depends on Google. It doesn't have its own implementation to try to find your lost device. Also note that it also includes the kids mode that can be quite useful if you are going to lend your phone to a little one. Simply you authorize what applications will be allowed to enter. You can also set a time limit and can also give warnings if the child is using the device in a very dark environment, and will enable the blue light filter if you enable it. So it is a mode that can be quite comfortable, and obviously to get out of that mode can only be authorized by the parent through the fingerprint. And in other security things, within the Security Center application note that has a collaboration with Avast to do the malware scan in case you require it. And of course, in this case also allows you to add multiple users to the device. Finally, if you have an emergency, remember that you can press 5 times the power button to make an emergency call. With respect to the battery, something curious happened, so I want to tell you that the device may have a battery that is not going to yield all that we would like, even though its capacity is 5000 milliamps in my tests. You know, that ran a battery drainer and endured 4 hours with 12 minutes having this application running in the foreground, which is where it usually has a higher consumption. But curiously, when I ran this test, running this draining in the background while playing videos in the foreground, the device yielded less time, when the vast majority of devices I have tested in this test running in the background actually have a better performance. But in real, I actually did worse, reaching 3 hours with 52 minutes. So as a reference, in other devices has reached a much longer time. Therefore, I think the battery could be its weakest point without being a disaster. But there are definitely other devices that manage the energy in a better way. Obviously, manually, you can go to this section. If you want the battery to be optimizing, then you can select how you want it to behave. In some scenarios, if you feel that some background applications are consuming a lot of energy, you can enter this section, but obviously requires much more adjustments by the user to have a better performance. Obviously, if we are going to find a power saving mode, that I think it will help you, because it will surely manage more aggressively the applications running in the background, and also has a super power saving mode that in some emergency can also be useful, because it will limit you many options and will only leave access to 6 applications that you consider totally necessary. And with respect to the load, remember that supports SuperVOOC load 67 watts. This charger is included in its box, and in my test with 15 minutes of charge recovered 39%, with 30 minutes of charge reached 68%, and the full charge finished in 53 minutes. So while the battery was not so spectacular load, if it is also has smart charging that can learn your charging habits, so that in case you are of the careless users who leave it connected for a long time, go charging slower so that the battery does not deteriorate so fast. And if you are a user who for some reason must have your phone connected at all times, you can also pause charging at 80% again to avoid rapid degradation of this important element. So the load has very good features. As you already realized, it does not have wireless charging, but it is not something we could demand at this price. In connectivity, if we will find support for 5G. And in this case, you can obviously set some limits to avoid being consumed with much speed, and obviously also have the option to select how we want to access the internet to certain applications. For example, YouTube, you can set that you can only access the internet using your mobile data, or you could even tell some applications can never access the internet, which would also be practical in some scenarios. As all accounts, it is able to reach a good download speed, obviously depending on your internet provider and your router. But if I can tell you that it has good speed besides supporting 5G networks, it also supports Wi-Fi 6 networks and Bluetooth 5.2. So it comes with recent connectivity, although in Bluetooth not so much, also includes NFC, so you can make mobile payments with your cell phone in conjunction with Google Pay or some other applications, but does not include FM radio like most devices in this price. It also has OTG, so you can connect some other special accessories in the USB port, but you have to enable this option because by default is disabled. Also has an option to project the screen, and the projection can become quite advanced because it is able to hide notifications or project with the screen off, so it has good elements, but at the moment seems to have a bug when we are projecting the screen because it is not allowing us to open applications, so the phone stays frozen. And in some scenarios, if we show the settings project with OP Synergy, then it seems that this should be corrected with an update, but at least it seems that if you have an advanced projection, hopefully it will be correct. We will also find Android Auto. And another thing I really liked about this device is that it does not sacrifice practically any sensor. You have accelerometer, geomagnetic field, gyroscope orientation, light sensor, and also a proximity sensor of the traditional ones, that is to say, not the virtual sensors that many manufacturers are implementing lately. So you should have an optimal performance in this device with respect to all its sensors. Now let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem that is able to achieve Realme, and in this sense I think the experience can become good with respect to the number of devices because it has a good catalog of headphones, also a good catalog of watches, and of course also has some tablets. However, despite having several devices, we could still consider that the ecosystem is growing because it still does not have such an advanced interaction between them, and depend on Google regarding the control of home devices because, as you realize, in this case, if we open the control section, it connects directly with Google Home, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but does not show much strength on the part of the brand. You will have quick share-to-share files quickly between Android devices or even also with some computers. And speaking of that, has a quick share to be able to share files quickly between Android devices or even also with some computers. And speaking of that, has a good catalog of headphones, also a good catalog of watches, and of course it also has some tablets. Computers. And speaking of that, has a technology called Multi-Screen Connect that would allow you to connect to your computer or your tablet to duplicate the screen and be able to do various actions. You could also have some level of synchronization with your clipboard or some images, but obviously all this requires a little more advanced configuration if you're going to do it on a Windows computer, but if you do not want to complicate too much installing, all that also brings the link to Windows already pre-installed, and this is going to link much easier with any computer. Windows obviously also has Google Fast, but to link hearing aids that have this technology easily. However, Realme currently does not have its own cloud, so it depends entirely on Google, although in China if they have HeatUp Cloud, but globally not. Let's talk about performance. This device has the Snapdragon 7S Gen 2 processor, a processor that we have not tested very constantly, so we are curious to see what performance it is capable of achieving. It took approximately 2.8 seconds to open each application. So I think the behavior has been good in the speed of this processor. Of course, we will also test how it behaves once we are inside the applications and see how the time to slide between all the contents, we do not notice that it freezes at any time. So I think it will be a device that will be able to give us a very good performance perhaps here. When switching between one application and another took a little longer than I would have liked. But let's continue doing these same tests with scroll within another type of content and see how it continues to have a considerably good behavior. So input in this type of use, I think if the processor gives us a good performance, the device has 12 gigabytes of RAM, figure that is too high and can still be expanded virtually up to 12 additional gigabytes, although this is for the version with 512 gigabytes storage, which is the one I am testing, but the version with 256 has 8 gigabytes of RAM. Sincerely, I would recommend you to purchase the version of 512 because there is not much difference in price and doubles the storage, giving you a tremendous capacity where you can store lots and lots of applications, lots and lots of games, lots and lots of videos without your device getting full. Just remember that does not have support for micro SD. But obviously with 12 gigabytes of RAM, this device will be able to keep open practically all the applications you want to see how you do not notice that the device has some kind of reboot when we are switching between these applications, giving an extremely good performance. Now let's test how long it takes to export several clips together with a total duration of 1 minute. Although in this case note that although the videos are in 4K, CapCut is not yet compatible with this processor 100%. And in fact you should know that when importing the videos compressed them, even though I said I did not want to compress them, so the videos are already compressed, so surely the process will take longer. Compressed, so surely the export process will be much faster. But anyway, let's do the test. And it took 34 seconds. And the truth, considering that they are compressed videos, gives us to understand that it has a bad performance, at least in this editor. But to be fair, let's do the test in another editor that I bought called LumaFusion. Although this editor is paid, again here we have all the clips ready for this export process. In this case, yes, it will be able to export video in 4K, so let's do the test right now. Ready, it took more or less a minute with 5 seconds, confirming us that this device will not be very capable of editing video quickly and smoothly in 4K, maybe in full HD if, but the processor seems to be not so powerful in that aspect. For games, it has an application of the same name, and note that we can explore new content or also explore our own games. And in this case, we can also have some instant games to run without installing, although these are much simpler but comes in handy if you do not want to consume space on your device. But for the most gamers who want the best experience, let me tell you that also when you open a game will run a special game mode. That note you can reveal in this part to show you the frames per second in which the game is running will also show you how is the Wi-Fi connectivity and the temperature of the device. You can also change profiles between a pro gamer mode that will give you maximum performance, a balanced mode, or a power saving mode in case you want to play without your device is consumed. Both the battery also have a brightness control from this part, and we can open applications in floating mode without having to leave our game. Also, we will be able to have a focus mode in the game that will block any kind of interruption or unwanted touches to avoid any discomfort when playing, and we will also be able to have a different display of notifications. For example, in this case there are the traditional alert notifications, but I'm going to change to bullet notifications, and notice how it will appear a completely different alert notifications that will not get in the way. So much watch how the message appears and goes through, then it does not become annoying and is a feature that I have not seen present in many devices. Can also block calls or take screenshots or screen recordings and optimize the network in addition to optimizing the touch response. Then I think it has several features to make your gaming experience something much more advanced. Also, you can enable constant monitoring of the system to see the GPU consumption, CPU consumption, and frames per second at which the game is running. And finally, you can have a screen lock that does not suspend the game so that the game downloads some content without consuming so much battery. And that will be pretty much all. We have added software focused on games. I think it is a pretty complete suite of options, but now let's see how it did in our tests. In Call of Duty, this device gave us by default the high quality graphics at a very high frame rate. However, it also allows us to go up to a maximum frame rate without lowering the graphic quality, and note that in this case the processor will have a not so advanced graphic support as it does not allow to enable various effects, and that can definitely become a weak point, fortunately, if there are the experimental features. Then in the test, the truth is that it did very well, but honestly it seems that it was not such a complicated test for its price range, as other devices in this similar price range may have a more advanced graphics support, supporting the ultra rate frames per second or similar things. Then incompatibility is to O, but possibly it is because the processor is still not so optimized. Maybe with future updates of the games and the system, it will have a better graphic compatibility, but for the moment what we have to see is that the performance is going to be very good with this configuration that allows we are going to notice a very good stability and definitely very fluid frames per second. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to a manual setting and set the graphic detail on a high level to have a more or less adequate test for its price range and going up to 60 frames per second. Again, in this case, the experience was quite good. We simply saw some small loss of frames, especially in the beginning, as it is something very similar in this game, but it does not stay completely frozen. And note that you can also enjoy good graphics, a fairly smooth gameplay. And in this case, it did not get to raise its temperature too much, so it seems to go well managed to have perfectly its average of 60 frames per second. So I would say that if you are going to give you a good experience, even recording the screen as you realize the experience was good. Just remind you that the test monitoring frames per second we do separately from the screen recording, so recording the screen may perhaps get to have a little more stumbles, but it really is nothing serious. In the SpongeBob game, we have by default the high resolution and quality at 60 frames per second. However, to have a more or less adequate test for a device of this price, we set the resolution to medium and the quality. We kept it high at 60 frames per second. And honestly, in this case, we see little stability. There are constant ups and downs, so it is not going to be a supreme experience, although this game is one of the most complicated we have tested on various devices, so there are few devices that can give you a super smooth experience in this game, so it is not surprising that this device has not had the ability to give us total fluidity. Also, we saw a little more heating, although still without exceeding 45 degrees Celsius. And finally, in Henshin Impact by default, we have the low graphic quality, but for the test, we went up to the medium quality, and we also went up to the medium quality. To medium quality, and we also went up to 60 frames per second and the motion blur. We also set it to high, and in this case it is curious that it did not even try to go beyond 30 frames per second, so it seems that intelligently the device adapted to 30 frames per second. Perhaps to not generate so much heating, or perhaps to have greater stability, we do not know exactly the reason, but the truth of the case is that it has a limit to 30 frames per second at certain times, and that may bother some people, although it also causes that maintain a very good stability. Really, the least that went down was up to 29 frames per second. Then the experience was super smooth, but if you are going to find other devices in this price range that will give you a better experience, being able to go up to more than 30 frames per second in this game. So I do not think this device will satisfy the most demanding gamers, especially because in this same price range or even cheaper, you could find more powerful devices to play. However, for more casual gamers, I think you will have a good experience. And with this, we have reached the end of this video review. As a conclusion, I can tell you that it is one of the most balanced devices of the year and therefore could easily be recommended to purchase. Obviously going to have some points that could improve as water resistance, but honestly there are few weaknesses that we can detect this device. The camera is possibly its most attractive point, and the rest of features remains very balanced for the moment. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed this content. If so, you know you can indicate it, and we'll see you next time.